the first problem here is to find the dimensions of a rectangle, and we are told what the perimeter of our rectangle is, but however we are given dimensions for length as 2w plus 1 and width as w. So what we need to do here is we need to build an equation using the information. Now, perimeter is the distance if we walk around the whole outside dimension of this rectangle. So we're going to need 2 lengths and 2 widths. So that looks like this. As an equation, we've got 2 times 2w plus 1 plus 2 times w, and that's equal to the perimeter 98. 98 meters, in fact, because this means meters. We now need to distribute this 2 to the 2w and to the 1, so we get 2 times 2w, which is 4w, plus 2 times 1, which is 2, plus 2w, and that's equal to 98. We're going to gather like terms. 4w and 6w is, 4w and 2w is 6w. I was a little ahead of myself there. Plus 2 equals 98. We want to move the 2 out of the way, get numbers on the right. Subtract 2 from each side, we get 6w is equal to 96. Then we divide by 6 on each side. And we end up here with w equals 16. 16 meters. This is a word problem, and that means the number has units or dimensions, and they matter. Let's turn now to one of the simpler equations in this worksheet, number 1. Now, number 1, we've got 4x minus 9 equals 7x plus 12. We're going to add 9 to each side to move the numbers to the right, and that's going to leave us with 21 on the right over here. That's plus 21. And we're going to move the 7x, the letters, to the left. So we're going to subtract 7x from each side. Those guys can't not cancel but obliterate each other because they're opposites. And then the 4x minus 7x, that's negative 3x. So we've got negative 3x equals 21. We're going to divide by negative 3 on each side to get x all by itself is a 1x, and 21 over negative 3 is a negative 7. Right, our next problem is number 5. This one is 3w plus 2 is equal to 2 minus 10w. We're going to subtract 2 from each side here. Move the numbers to the right. That's interesting. These two are both going to cancel out. They're going to, because 2 and negative 2 are opposite, so that adds up to 0 on each side. That leaves us with 3w equals negative 10w. We're going to get the letters on the left by adding 10w to each side. And 10w and negative 10w, that's 0. And 3w plus 10w is 13w. So 13w equals 0. We're going to divide by 13 on each side. That will give us 1w is equal to, and 0 divided by anything except itself is 0. And so our answer is w equals 0 for this one. And let's move on now to number 7 here at the bottom. We've got 8m plus 13 equals 13 plus 8m. Wait a second. Think about this one for a moment. We may not have any work to do. 8m plus 13 equals 13 plus 8m. That's the commutative property for addition. There's a 13 on each side and there's an 8m on each side. We're adding them. That's an identity. In a case like this, m can actually be anything. Well, let's just solve it and prove that. We're going to subtract 13 from each side. So those two add up to 0 on each side, and we're left with 8m equals 8m. Again, we have an identity. Let's get the letters on the left. We'll subtract 8m from each side. And we're going to end up with 0 equals 0. Add 15 to both sides. Those are opposites. And we will subtract 4x from each side. So 8x minus 4x is 4x. That's the letters on the left. And then on the right side, we have 12 plus 15, which is 27. We'll divide by 4 on each side to get x equals 27 over 4, which is equivalent to 6 3/4. Now, the next few problems present a little added difficulty because the distributive property is going to be required on both the left side and the right side. So let's take a careful look here at this problem. We have a -3 multiplying the b minus 8, and that means we need to multiply this -3 to the b and to the -8. I like to gather the signs on these so I get my signs right when I multiply. -3 times b is -3b. -3 times -8 is plus 24 minus 5. This is equal to a 9b and a 9 times 2, which is 18, and then the plus 1 on the end. Before we go further here with solving, we want to gather like terms. Not -3b and -5, of course, but 24 and -5. And those add to 19, so we get 3b, -3b, plus 19 is equal to 9b plus 19. Now here we can see we have a 19 on both sides. So we will subtract 19 from both sides, add to 0 on each side, and this leaves us with -3b equals 9b. We will subtract 9b on each side now to get letters on the left. That gives us -12b equals 0. It's probably clear to you at this point that b must be 0. Well, let's just solve for b as we normally would by dividing by -12 on each side. And we find, in fact, b is 0 because 0 divided by anything but itself is 0. We've got -4 times 2 and -4 times -3x. Again, capture that negative sign with the term. -4 times 2 is -8. -4 times -3x is plus 12x. That's equal to 7. -2 times x, so that's a -2x. And -2 times a -3, which is plus 6. We want to gather like terms if we can before we solve, and 7 plus 6 are like terms. We'll combine those and we get 13 minus 2x on the right. And then we have -8 plus 12x on the left. We'll move numbers to the right by adding 8 to each side, and we'll move letters to the left by adding 2x on each side. This gives us 14x equals 21, and we'll divide by 14 on each side, and this will allow us to get to x equals 21 over 14, which is the same as 3 over 2. -3k plus a 5 times the quantity 6 minus k. By the way, these distributive property problems are a precursor. In other words, we're going to see these when we move into section 3.5 in the book. So we're getting practice on 3.5 already here. So we have a -3k on the left plus 5 times 6, which is 30, and a 5 times a -k, which is a -5k. That's equal to a 4 times 1, which is 4, and a 4 times a -2k, which is a -8k. We can gather like terms on the left. -3k and -5k is -8k plus 30 equals 4 minus 8k. Now we'll get letters on the left and numbers on the right. Subtract 30 from each side. Add 8k to each side. This gives us 0 on the left. Interesting. The variable term has disappeared. And 4 minus 30 is -26. Well, 0 does not equal -26. So we put a slash through the equal sign. This cannot be true. It isn't true. And this tells us that this problem, this equation that is, has no solution. I haven't seen that one before in this class. But it can occur. Let's move on now to the next section. And if you're looking at your sheet while you view this video, you can see the directions up above about fractions and combining them, but I'll talk through them right now. We've got a 3/4 t minus 5/4 equals 1/3 t. Now, we want to combine the t terms on the left, but we've got a 3/4 and we've got a 1/3. The denominators are not the same. A common denominator here would be 4 times 3, which is 12, and 3/4 is the same as 9 out of 12, and so 3/4 t we turn into 9/12 t. You'll notice that 4 times 3 is 12 and 3 times 3 is 9. Minus 5/4 equals 1/3 t. Well, 1/3 t is 4 over 12 t. Again, 3 times 4 is 12 and 1 times 4 is 4. We now have our common denominators, and we can move on here to put our letters on the left by subtracting 4/12 t from each side, and we can put our numbers on the right by adding 5/4 to each side. And this leaves us with the following. 5/4 is on the right side, and 9/12 t minus 4/12 t, we subtract the 4 from the 9, the denominator is unchanged. That gives us 5/4 t on the left. 9 minus 4 is 5. And now we can multiply by 4/5 on each side, reciprocal of 5/4. And we arrive at the following, that t is equal to 1, because it was a reciprocal situation on both sides of this equation in this case. Finally, our last problem. Let's line it up. Here we go. We got 1/3 n plus 3/4 equals 5/6 n minus 1. Slightly more complicated with the numbers, but the fractions are actually friendlier because 3 goes into 6 twice. So 1/3, 3 times 2 is 6, 1 times 2 is 2. So we can write 2 out of 6, or 2/6 n plus 3/4 is equal to 5 over 6 n minus 1. We're going to move the letters to the left by subtracting 5/6 n from each side. And we'll move the numbers to the right by subtracting 3/4 from each side. That gives us the following. 2/6n minus 5/6n. 2 minus 5 is negative 3. So it's negative 3/6n. And that is equal to negative 1 and a negative 3/4. Well, 1 is 4 over 4. So negative 4 over 4 plus negative 3 over 4 is negative 7 over 4. And to solve for n now, we're going to multiply each side by negative 6/3, the reciprocal of negative 3/6. Careful with your signs on this one. Again, reciprocals multiply to 1, so we get n equals the following. Negative times negative on the right, so it's going to be a positive quantity on the right. 7 times 6 up top is 42. 4 times 3 in the bottom is 12. So 42 over 12 is our answer. If you'd like, you can simplify it. Both numbers divide by 6, and that gives us 42 divided by 6 is 7, and 12 divided by 6 is 2. 7/2, or 3.5. And there's our answer. That concludes our tutorial on this assignment. I hope this was helpful to you. Use it in your studies. Over and out, Mr. King.